3 weeks. The cold, razor-sharp voice of the stranger he was forced to call his wife cut through the stifling silence in the lavish penthouse. 3 weeks of drama. And after that, I want $250,000 in my account. Mr. Knight. Not a penny less. The icy pronouncement still echoed in Ethan Knight's mind, sharper than the November wind howling outside his 50th floor window overlooking the glittering lights of Chicago. The atmosphere at Alistair Finch's Lake Michigan mansion just hours earlier had been thick with opulence and power, where he had been smilingly introducing his surprise spouse. Huge crystal chandeliers cast glittering rays of light onto the polished marble floors where the city's most important guests had gathered. Ethan Knight, CEO of Knight Corp Industries, stood tall, trying to hide the turmoil churning inside him, a storm of emotions more violent than the fateful card game on which he had just staked his career. The champagne flute in his hand barely moved, a testament to the extraordinary self-control he had honed over years of business. But tonight, that self-control is being tested to the limit by a painfully familiar figure, a voice that was once his whole world, now echoing harsh terms. The atmosphere at Alistair Finch's Lake Michigan mansion was thick with luxury and power. Huge crystal chandeliers cast glittering rays across the polished marble floor, where Chicago's most important guests had gathered. Ethan Knight, CEO of Knight Corp Industries, stood tall, trying to hide the tension tightening in his chest. The champagne flute in his hand barely moved, a testament to the extraordinary self-control he had developed over years of business. But tonight, that self-control was being tested to the limit. The $200 million investment from Finch Holdings was more than just a number. It was Knight Corp's lifeblood, the key to its international expansion, the leap he had been preparing for with all his heart and soul. And Alistair Finch, the eccentric but powerful tycoon, had a strange condition: he would only do business with men with stable families. A wife? Ethan took a sip of champagne, the taste surprisingly bitter. He had come to Elite Companions, a high-end contract partner service, through a discreet introduction from a partner. The profile he had hastily selected asked only for someone elegant, intelligent, well-mannered, 40 to 45 years old. Ms. Albright, the service manager, had promised absolute professionalism and discretion. He had not even met his wife. "You seem a little tense." "Ethan." Alistair Finch's deep voice sounded beside him. "Mr. Finch," with his silver hair and keen eyes, patted him on the shoulder. "Relax. It's been a wonderful evening." Ethan forced a casual smile. "Thanks, Mr. Finch. Just a little nervous." "I see." Mr. Finch nodded. "I hear Mrs. Knight will be here shortly. I look forward to meeting the woman who has captured the heart of a workaholic like you." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. At that moment, a jet-black Rolls-Royce slowly entered the mansion and stopped right in front of the main hall. All curious eyes turned to the car. The back door opened. A pair of elegant high heels touched down on the red carpet. Then a slender figure, wearing a jade-green evening gown that accentuated her fair skin and chestnut-brown hair tied up in a noble bun, slowly walked out. Ethan Knight stood rooted to the spot. The champagne glass in his hand shook, nearly falling to the floor. The world around him stopped. His breath caught in his chest. No, it couldn't be. That woman, the one he hired to play his wife, the one who fate ironically arranged to appear at the most important moment of his life, was Sophia Holloway. Ellie, his first love, the only woman he had ever loved with all his heart and lost 20 years ago because of silly misunderstandings and blind ambitions of youth. She still retained her gentle, elegant beauty, but her warm brown eyes now had a more determined look, a bit of fatigue and a distant sadness that he could feel even from dozens of meters away. Sophia raised her head, her eyes scanning the crowd and stopping at Ethan. A hint of unconcealable surprise appeared on her delicate face, then was quickly replaced by a look of perfect professionalism and coolness. But Ethan, who knew her every little expression, saw the confusion and bewilderment flashing in her eyes. Alistair Finch did not realize the earthquake that was happening inside Ethan. He smiled brightly, walking towards Sophia. Welcome, Alexander. Are you not going to introduce this beautiful lady to me? This must be Mrs. Knight, whom you have kept so secret." Ethan swallowed, his throat dry. He stepped forward, feeling like he was walking on air. "Yes, Mr. Finch," he stuttered, trying to keep his voice from shaking. "This is my wife, Sophia." Sophia smiled politely at Mr. Finch, a perfect, flawless smile, then turned to look at Ethan, her eyes flickering with complexity before returning to professional composure. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Finch." Ethan felt his blood rush to his head. The play had barely begun, and already he felt like he was about to collapse. The fate of his company, the future of Night Corp, and perhaps his and Sophia's unfinished lives, all depended on this twisted drama. He had to stay calm. They had to stay calm. But how could they, when the past that had been thought dormant suddenly came alive, with unexpected vigor and ferocity? The evening dragged on in a quiet tension that only Ethan and Sophia could fully feel. They had to play the part of a happy couple. The gestures of care calculated, the smiles rehearsed. Sophia, with her natural intelligence and charm, managed it admirably. She chatted with the guests, answered curious questions about their surprise marriage with cleverly fabricated stories, occasionally glancing at Ethan for approval. Ethan just nodded and tried to look as natural as possible. Alistair Finch seemed pleased. He kept a constant eye on them with a warm, scrutinizing gaze, occasionally cracking a joke to lighten the mood. However, Julian Vance, Night Corp's CFO, was not so easily fooled. His sharp gaze constantly scanned Ethan and Sophia, searching for any loopholes, any signs of abnormality. He made several attempts to approach Sophia, asking subtle questions about their relationship. "It's surprising that Ethan has finally settled down," Julian said to Sophia while Ethan was busy with another guest, his voice tinged with sarcasm. "He's always been an unpredictable guy." Sophia just smiled. "Love always comes when we least expect it, doesn't it, Mr. Vance?" Finally, the party ended. The silence was thick as they drove back to the penthouse Ethan had hastily prepared for their newlywed home on the Gold Coast. Sophia looked out the window, the nightlights of Chicago passing by like a blur. Ethan was silent too, his mind reeling. As the car stopped in front of the building, Ethan finally broke the silence. "We need to talk." The penthouse was luxurious but cold. Ethan poured himself a glass of scotch, then looked at Sophia, who was standing in the middle of the living room, her expression eerily calm. "Sophia." Why Ethan's voice was hoarse. "Why you? Of all the millions in this city?" Sophia turned, her eyes fixed on him. No longer fake professionalism, only exhaustion and a hint of bitterness. "I need money, Ethan. A lot of money. The service pays well. I didn't know it was you until I got out of that car." Then she spoke. Her voice was flat and emotionless, as if she were reading a report. Her father, Robert Holloway, a mild-mannered retired professor, was battling a serious heart condition at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. He needed complex surgery and long-term care costs of nearly $250,000. Her small interior design company, Holloway Designs, her pride and joy, had gone bankrupt 2 years ago after a business partner swindled her out of all her money, leaving her in massive debt. She had tried everything, doing small freelance design jobs, but nothing was enough to make ends meet. Desperate, she had turned to elite companions as a last resort. Ethan listened, Sophia's words cutting into his heart like knives. Guilt and regret welled up in him. He remembered the good old days when they were at Northwestern University, the dreamy architecture student and the ambitious economics student. They had loved each other so much, had made so many plans for the future. Flashback. 22 years ago. Northwestern University Library. Sophia was working on a sketch of a community library, her chestnut brown hair falling over her shoulders. Ethan, finishing his macroeconomics class, happened to walk by. He stopped, drawn in by the focus and passion she radiated. "So beautiful," he blurted. Sophia looked up, startled. Her cheeks flushed. "Oh, thanks." just an idea. They began to talk, from architecture to economics, from dreams to fears of youth. A rainy afternoon in the library was the beginning of a pure and intense love. They walked together along the windy Lake Michigan, shared cheap sandwiches and big dreams. Reality pulled Ethan back. He told Sophia about the pressure of the Finch Holdings contract, about Alastair Finch's strange conditions. "I had no choice," he said, his voice full of helplessness. "I understand," Sophia replied, her voice steady but slightly shaky. "Me too." They sat across from each other amidst the false luxury of the penthouse. Two people who had once been each other's everything, now bound by a strange contract and the burdens of life. "We'll continue this play," Ethan said, his voice more determined. "Until the contract is signed, that should be 3 weeks. Then I'll pay you whatever you need. Consider it. Consider it compensation. Compensation for this awkwardness, and perhaps for past hurts." Sophia nodded. 3 weeks. Flashback. 20 years ago. A small coffee shop near school. Ethan had just received a job offer from a major investment bank in New York. It was a golden opportunity, but it meant leaving Chicago, leaving Sophia, at least for a while. He was excited to tell her, but Sophia seemed pensive. Meanwhile, Julian Vance, a fellow economics student of Ethan's who is friendly but secretly jealous of Ethan's talent and love for Sophia, begins to make his moves to separate them. He tells Sophia that Ethan only sees her as a temporary school fling, that Ethan's ambitions are too great, and that New York will change him. To Ethan, Julian hints that Sophia feels pressured by his career, that she doesn't want to be a burden. A huge argument broke out between Ethan and Sophia. Youthful pride, unresolved misunderstandings, and vague fears about the future drove them apart. "Don't you trust me?" Ellie Ethan shouted. "You think I don't want you to succeed?" Sophia replied, tears in her eyes. They split up. Ethan threw himself into his career in New York, trying to drown his sorrow with work. Sophia stayed in Chicago, heartbroken, trying to rebuild her life. Ethan looked at Sophia, the strong woman sitting in front of him, who had been through so much. He wondered if that year, if he had been more mature, if they had trusted each other more, would things have been different? "We need to agree on a few stories," Sophia said, pulling Ethan out of his thoughts about how we met, how we fell in love. "Mr. Finch seems to care." Ethan nodded. "Tomorrow, Olivia, my assistant, will be coming. She will help us prepare a few things." That night, Ethan slept on the sofa in the living room, while Sophia slept in the master bedroom. Neither could sleep. The past and present intertwined, unanswered questions swirling in their minds. The drama had only just begun, but the stakes seemed to be much higher than $200 million. The next few days were a series of awkward but increasingly masterful performances. Olivia Chen, Ethan's sharp and dedicated executive assistant, was informed of her boss's surprise marriage. She was professional, not a little curious, but Ethan knew Olivia was smart enough to sense that something was not quite right. She helped them rearrange the penthouse, adding Sophia's personal items, a few art books, a favorite English tea set from her old apartment, and even accidentally left a few artfully photoshopped together photos on Ethan's desk. Ethan and Sophia must relearn about each other after 20 years apart, not for love, but to make their play convincing. They spend hours talking about their interests. Sophia still loves classical jazz. Ethan now has a new hobby of collecting antique watches. Habits: Sophia always drinks Earl Grey tea in the morning. Ethan must have a black espresso without sugar, and inventing shared memories. "We could say we met again at an art exhibition 6 months ago," Sophia suggested, her eyes still glued to the tablet screen where she was searching for information about Mr. Finch's recent events. "You happened to be there, and we recognized each other." Ethan nodded. "Sounds reasonable? And we are kindled so quickly because the feelings were still there." He said the last sentence, his voice a little hesitant. The meetings with Alastair Finch became more frequent. An intimate dinner at the famous Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse, a charity fundraiser that Night Corp was the main sponsor of. Each time, Ethan and Sophia had to put on a front of being a happy couple. public hand-holding, calculated affectionate glances, jokes that only the two of them got. Surprisingly, sometimes, between the layers of acting, real emotions crept in. One evening, after returning from a tense event where Julian Vance again deliberately asked questions that probed their love-at-first-sight story, Sophia felt a little dizzy. Ethan, for the first time in years, felt a genuine anxiety. He helped her into the living room, got her some water, and even clumsily took her temperature. "I'm fine," Sophia said, her voice weak. "Just a little tired." Ethan sat down next to her on the sofa, keeping a certain distance. "You should rest more. This play, it took a lot more than I thought." "Both of us," Sophia replied softly. In the quiet of the penthouse, they began to talk, no longer rehearsed lines. Sophia told of the years of struggle to build Holloway designs, of her passion for living spaces that evoked a sense of warmth and peace. Ethan listened, and for the first time, he truly saw the resilience and talent of the woman he had loved. Another day, as Sophia was rearranging some items in the living room, she accidentally knocked over an old box. Inside were interior design sketches she had made years ago, bold and artistic. Ethan picked them up, examining each drawing carefully. "These are wonderful designs." "Sophia," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "Why did you abandon them?" Sophia looked away, a hint of sadness crossing her face. "Life isn't always what we want it to be, Ethan. Sometimes passion has to give way to more practical things." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. He remembered the passionate young girl who could talk for hours about the buildings and spaces she dreamed of creating. He realized that, perhaps, he was partly responsible for extinguishing that flame. Julian Vance did not stop his probing. He had Sophia secretly followed, trying to find out about her past and her finances. He found out that her father was in the hospital and that his condition was critical. This information, in the hands of someone like Julian, was like a time bomb. During a working lunch, Julian deliberately asked Ethan about their honeymoon plans, his tone suggestive. Sophia would love a trip to Paris. She seems like a romantic. Ethan just smiled faintly. "We haven't decided yet. Julian, there's a lot of work to be done. However, amidst the tension and lies, the old romantic sparks began to rekindle, uncontrollably. One evening, as they were both watching an old movie on TV, a familiar romantic scene made them glance at each other. Their eyes met for just a moment, but it was enough to make both of them feel their hearts beat faster. Sophia began to notice small changes in Ethan. He was no longer as cold and distant as he had been in the beginning. Occasionally, he asked about her father's health, even if it was just a short question. He also began to share more about the pressures of work and the concerns of a CEO leading a large corporation. Ethan also realized that Sophia was more than just a contract partner. She was smart, sharp, and had an inner warmth that he had missed all these years. He found himself drawn to the strength hidden beneath her gentle exterior, to the way she faced adversity without complaining. On the rare occasion Ethan came home early, he found Sophia sitting quietly by the window, looking out at the Chicago streets, glittering with nightlights. She had a sketchbook in her hand, but her pencil was still there. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked softly. Sophia was slightly startled. "Nothing important. Just remembering some old things." She hesitated, then continued. "Ethan, thank you for helping my father." Even though a contract was a contract, she knew Ethan didn't necessarily have to show such concern. "That's what I should do," Ethan replied, his voice lower. He stepped closer, looking at the sketchbook. The unfinished outlines of a cozy living room with a fireplace and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "You're still passionate about it, aren't you?" Sophia nodded slightly. "It never really went away." In that moment, there was no contract, no Alistair Finch, no Julian Vance, just two people, scarred by the past and uncertain about the future, but feeling a fragile connection slowly mending. The play must go on. But the line between fake and real is becoming increasingly blurred, and that makes them both hopeful and fearful. The 3-week deadline was approaching. The official signing date with Finch Holdings was set for next Friday. Everything seemed to be going according to Ethan's plan, except for his mixed feelings for Sophia. Julian Vance, however, had no intention of letting Ethan off the hook. He had been quietly gathering enough evidence to strike a fatal blow. On Wednesday morning, 2 days before the signing, Julian Vance requested a private meeting with Alistair Finch. He brought a thick file with him, his face full of confidence and cunning. It contained a copy of the service contract between Ethan Knight and Elite Companions, photographs of Sophia looking worried as she entered and exited Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and a detailed report on her dire financial situation and her father's critical condition. "Mr. Finch," Julian began in an important tone, "I regret to inform you, but I have irrefutable evidence that Ethan Knight has been blatantly deceiving you. His marriage to Sophia Holloway was an elaborate ruse designed to meet your needs. She was a hired gold digger, and Ethan Knight will stop at nothing to get this contract." Alistair Finch listened silently, his sharp eyes boring into Julian, then skimming over the documents on the table. His face betrayed no emotion. Immediately after that meeting, Alistair Finch called Ethan, asking him and Mrs. Knight to come to his office at Finch Holdings immediately. His voice was cold and stern. Unlike his usual friendly demeanor, Ethan felt his heart sink. He knew something was wrong. He looked at Sophia, who was making tea in the kitchen. "Ellie," he said, the pet name from the past falling naturally. "Mr. Finch wants to see us now." Sophia saw the tension on Ethan's face. She didn't ask anything more, just nodded silently. In the luxurious office of Finch Holdings, the air was as heavy as lead. Alistair Finch sat behind a massive mahogany desk. Julian Vance stood beside him, his face full of undisguised triumph. "Please sit down," Mr. Finch said evenly. He pushed the file toward Ethan and Sophia. "I think you two should take a look at this." Ethan opened the file. His hands shook as he saw the Elite Companions contract, the photos of Sophia. He looked up, met Mr. Finch's eyes, then glanced at Julian Vance, who was smirking. Anger and despair surged through him at the same time. Sophia also glanced over, her face pale, but she still tried to stay calm, her back straight. "Ethan," Mr. Finch began, his voice remaining eerily calm. "Julian here has given me this information. What do you have to say?" Ethan faced a stark choice. He could continue to lie, deny it, and hope for a slim chance of saving the deal. Or he could tell the truth and risk losing everything: his company, his reputation, and perhaps his slim chance with Sophia. He looked at Sophia. Her eyes were on him. No reproach, only anticipation and a little hurt. It was that look that helped him make his decision. He couldn't lose her again because of his calculation and cowardice. He had done it once in the past, and the past 20 years were enough for him to regret. Ethan took a deep breath. "Mr. Finch," he began, his voice steady, no longer hesitant. "What's in this file is largely true." Julian Vance sneered. Sophia closed her eyes slightly. "It is true that I hired Sophia through a service to pose as my wife," Ethan continued, looking straight at Mr. Finch. "Night Corp is in dire straits, and your contract is the only salvation. I knew about your conditions, and in my desperation, I did something wrong." He paused, then continued, his voice more sincere. "But there's one thing this document doesn't tell us. The woman I hired, Sophia Holloway, is Ellie, my first love. We fell in love 20 years ago and broke up over misunderstandings. Seeing her again under these circumstances was a huge shock to both of us." Ethan turned to look at Sophia, his eyes filled with regret and deep affection. "Over the past 3 weeks, while having to act in front of everyone, we had the chance to understand each other again. And I realized that my feelings for Sophia, They're still there, even stronger than before. I made a mistake by starting this relationship with a lie, but my feelings for her now are real. It was Sophia's turn to speak. Her voice was a little shaky, but still filled with dignity. Mr. Finch, I accepted this job because of extremely difficult family circumstances. My father is seriously ill and I need money for his treatment. I had no idea who hired me was Ethan until the last moment. It was true that it was just a contract at first, but what Ethan just said about our feelings, it was the truth. She raised her head, meeting Mr. Finch's gaze. I'm not excusing my actions, but I'm not the gold digger that Mr. Vance has implied. Julian Vance tried to interject, but Mr. Finch raised his hand to silence him. The old tycoon remained unreadable. He looked at Ethan, then at Sophia, his keen eyes reading their thoughts. There was a long silence. Ethan felt his heart stop. He had prepared himself for the worst. Then, quite unexpectedly, a slight smile appeared on Alistair Finch's lips. Actually, he said slowly, from the beginning, I had my doubts about your quickie marriage. Ethan, it seemed too perfect, too rushed. He looked at Julian Vance, who was stunned. But I also sensed a special connection between the two of you in our meetings. It didn't seem fake. Mr. Finch stood up and paced the room. My request for a wife is not merely a business requirement. Ethan, I seek a mature partner who is capable of building lasting relationships, not only in business, but in life. Your honesty today, Ethan, and the genuine affection I saw between you two, despite the unusual beginnings, are more convincing to me than any perfect play. He stopped in front of Ethan and Sophia. I've made mistakes in the past, mistakes that have cost me dearly in my personal relationships. But I've also learned that honesty, even late, is always worth it. And second chances, if we're brave enough to take them, can bring great things. Alistair Finch turned to Julian Vance, his eyes cold. And you, Vance, your tricks may fool some people, but not me. I don't do business with people who use tricks to bring others down. Julian Vance paled, his mouth unable to form words. He was lost, completely lost. Mr. Finch turned back to Ethan and Sophia, his warm smile returning. The contract will still be signed on Friday. Ethan, Night Corp deserves this opportunity, and you two. He looked at them both. You two deserve to be happy. Tears began to roll down Sophia's cheeks. Ethan felt an indescribable sense of relief, along with a deep sense of gratitude towards the older man before him. He took Sophia's hand and squeezed it tightly. This time, it wasn't an act. True to promise, the $200 million investment deal between Finch Holdings and Night Corp Industries was signed on Friday afternoon. The ceremony was formal but intimate. Alistair Finch, as not only an investor but also a friend, shook Ethan's hand firmly. Prove I'm not mistaken, young man. The first thing Ethan did after securing the contract was to put Julian Vance to rest once and for all. He was fired immediately for unethical behavior and deliberate sabotage of the company. The news quickly spread throughout Chicago's business community, and Julian's reputation was completely destroyed. The second, and more important, thing for Ethan at the moment was Sophia. Immediately after the signing, he transferred a large sum of money from his personal account to pay for Robert Holloway's entire medical bills and ensure the best possible care for him. A few days later, Mr. Holloway's heart surgery was a success at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Sophia cried in Ethan's arms when she heard the news from Dr. Ramirez. They were tears of relief and gratitude. When all the storms had calmed down, when there was no longer the pressure of the fake contract and the scrutinizing eyes, Ethan and Sophia had a sincere talk in the penthouse, which had witnessed so many of their emotions. Sophia, Ethan began, his voice soft, taking her hand. I know we started off on the worst possible note. I was wrong, selfish. But what happened after that? My feelings for you, were real. I love you, Ellie, more than I ever thought I could. He knelt down on one knee and pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was an exquisite diamond ring, sparkling in the light. Sophia Holloway, will you be my wife again? This time, for real, with all my heart, not for any contract or other purpose. Sophia looked at Ethan, tears falling once again. But this time, they were tears of happiness. She had thought that her heart had become hardened after so much pain and loss. But Ethan, with his belated sincerity and enduring love, had healed it. I do, she whispered. Her voice choked. I do. Ethan. A real wedding, intimate and romantic, took place a few months later in an old church in the suburbs of Chicago. The guests were few, only the closest people, Alistair Finch, who smiled and witnessed their happiness, Olivia Chen, who had secretly supported her boss for a long time, and Sophia's father, Robert Holloway, who, although still frail, was beaming with happiness as he handed his daughter's hand to Ethan. Sophia, with Ethan's support and encouragement, decided to reopen Holloway Designs. This time, she was not alone. Nightcorp became her first major client, commissioning her to redesign their entire headquarters office space and several other high-end real estate projects. Her talent was quickly reestablished. Ethan has changed too. He's still a determined and talented CEO, but he's learned to balance his work and personal life. He's no longer a cold, work-a-machine. He's become warmer, more caring, and above all, he knows that true success isn't measured by the numbers on a balance sheet. 1 year later, the Chicago sunset casts a fiery orange glow over Lake Michigan. Ethan and Sophia prepare dinner together in their new home in Lincoln Park, a historic house that Sophia has renovated into a cozy and stylish living space. Soft jazz music plays from a small speaker. Ethan wrapped his arms around Sophia from behind as she tasted the soup. What smells so good, Mrs. Knight, he whispered in her ear. Sophia smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. Chef's secret. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with love and peace. The journey they had gone through was full of obstacles, misunderstandings, lies, and pain. But in the end, fate, in an ironic way, brought them back together, stronger and more appreciative of each other. Did you ever think, Sophia said softly, if I hadn't stepped out of that car that day? Ethan tightened his arms. I don't dare think about it. But I know one thing. Ellie, no matter how many times I start over, no matter how many ways, I will find you, because you are my destiny. Their story is a testament to the fact that true love can overcome all challenges, all lies and misunderstandings. Second chances always exist for those who dare to face the truth, dare to open their hearts, and dare to love again. And sometimes, the most awkward beginnings can lead to the happiest and most fulfilling endings. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this story. If you love this story, don't forget to click like to support the channel, share this story with family and friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories.